Have you ever had something so near and dear to your heart that you cannot help but express your joy for it? Something from your childhood that made up part of who you are today? If you answered yes to either of those questions, then get ready for the ultimate rush of nostalgia. Today, we remember one of the greatest and most magically fun 3D platformers in history. I present to you the Spyro Trilogy Retrospective, starting with the classic hit, Spyro the Dragon. Prior to Spyro 1 being fully developed, there's a bit of history to be stated here. Insomniac Games, the original creator of Spyro, only had one game under their belt at the time, a rather mediocre Doom clone known as Disruptor. Unfortunately for Insomniac, Disruptor did not make the sales they were hoping it would make, so much so that it almost bankrupted the studio. Their only way to survive was to develop a game that would be a major hit. If not, Insomniac would have no choice but to close its doors. The dev team had a hard time creating a new concept for their next game. Artist at Insomniac, Craig Stitt, had always wanted to make a video game about dragons, as he thought they were the coolest creatures ever. But before Spyro was to be made into a kids game, the original vision was much different. Spyro was first conceived as a shooter game known as Dragon Span. You would play as a dragon, destroying everything in your path and defending your territory through each level. The character would grow in terms of abilities and size. If you want a more in-depth look into that story, I recommend watching Miharu the Fox's video about Spyro being a shooter game. Once everybody realized the PlayStation was lacking a true family game compared to the likes of Nintendo, it was decided to make Spyro appeal to a younger audience. Spyro's color was originally supposed to be green, and his name was also going to be Pete. His color was changed to stand out more. The fact that he would have blended in with the grass otherwise, and so that Insomniac wouldn't suffer any legal issues with Disney over the movie Pete's Dragon. Spyro's new original name was to be Pyro, the Greek word for fire, though the team thought it sounded a bit too mature. So they combined the Greek word for breathe, which funny enough is Spyro with an I, with the word pyro and got Spyro. For whatever reason, the name stuck, and thus, Spyro was on his way to becoming a household name. Spyro the Dragon has a very simple story. A couple of dragons are being interviewed live on TV talking about somebody named Nasty Nork who has been causing trouble in the Dragon Kingdom. Nasty happens to be watching the broadcast and throws a shit fit when he hears the dragons making fun of him. And that's it. This whole game legit happens because Nasty has the immaturity of a child. This big green tub of shit got so offended, he decided to crystallize all the dragons and rule over Spyro's homeland. Other than that, there is little to no story involved with the rest of the game. The only time you do get any bit of story is when a dragon elder is freed from their crystallized state, and even then, they just mostly give you basic gameplay tips rather than adding to the story. In the non-120% ending, the day is saved and life goes on, with Spyro stating that he still has to find more collectibles. In the 120% ending, Spyro is rocking some shades and states how Nasty was a worthy opponent despite his misguided nature, only for the dragons to be trapped in crystal yet again. I just summed up the plot in what, like under a minute? This isn't a terrible thing, however, as Spyro 1 is a charming experience that doesn't need a deep storyline to go along with it, though a few added details would have been nice. Spyro is your typical 3D collectathon platformer. A series of 5 levels are within each homeworld with the exception of the last one having 4. These consist of 3 platforming stages, a flight minigame, and a boss run. Within the homeworlds and levels you'll find the collectibles, gems, dragon eggs, and dragons themselves. Gems are obtained by finding them loosely on the ground, defeating enemies, destroying chests that either need to be flamed or charged, chests that require a key to open, these spinny things that must be torched several times, fireworks that will explode within a few seconds, and the special ones that must be activated so you can catch the gem flying up. Certain gems are placed in very peculiar areas, sometimes along with other items. This game is great for players who want to go out and explore as all the levels have different pathways to take to find everything. Extra lives are also spread across levels and can be found in some well-hidden areas. Dragon eggs are found after taking down an egg thief. They appear in a few levels and homeworlds, and all you need to do is charge after them for a bit before you'll finally catch up. The dragons are the most important. When you find find them, simply stand on the platform and they'll be freed. Sometimes they will give you some advice on basic game mechanics, and other times they'll say the infamous,
"Thank you for releasing me, Spyro.
Thank you for releasing me.
Thank you for releasing me.
Thank you for releasing me. Thank you for releasing me.
Thanks for releasing me, Spyro!"
Enemies range from a variety of Norks, Nasty Norks henchmen, wizards, druids, egg thieves, and all other kinds of creatures. Some are quite unique, like the druids who can mess with the level terrain, or these Norks that wield literal fucking guns.
121 guns.
More on that later. There are 6 homeworlds in total: Artisans, Peacekeepers, Magic Crafters, Beastmakers, Dreamweavers, and Nork Nexus, otherwise known as Nasty's World. Artisans is full of grassy terrain and easy levels where you can get used to the mechanics pretty quickly. Peacekeepers is a desert war zone chock full of dry rocky plains and Norks that moon you. Magic Crafters has wizards and druids that mess with the environment to get in your way. Peacemakers has swamp monsters in levels that aren't the most pretty to look at, lots of greens and browns, basically the color of shit. Dreamweavers, which is probably my favorite world, features vibrant colors, fairy tale-like enemies, and fun but small puzzles to solve. Nasty's World is really small and there isn't much to look at, full of factory-like settings with a real industrial vibe. This was originally going to be called the Mechanist World and was going to be a lot bigger, but it had to be downsized due to time constraints. There was one homeworld that was cut entirely known as Aquafires that would take place on an island with seas and rivers flowing through chasms, and it bears a bit of a resemblance to Lost Fleet from Spyro 3 or even Aquaria Towers from Spyro 2. This meant at one point Spyro was going to be able to swim, with secret underwater areas even being planned in some levels. Traveling between the homeworlds is done by getting a ride from the balloonist, who will only allow you to go when you've collected a certain required number of items. Interestingly, Tuco, the balloonist from Magic Crafters, will give you a lift to Stone Hill, Dry Canyon, or Cliff Town if you are missing any of the dragon eggs from those areas. This marks the only time where you can travel to anything other than a homeworld. Your 3 platforming stages are mostly linear, with a few branching paths to encourage exploration to reach max completion. These can range from gems and extra lives hiding around corners, to having to supercharge out of your way to find more stuff. Flight rounds are a break from the usual gameplay where you have infinite flight and must destroy the required targets within the time limit. Every time you destroy one of these objects, it'll add a couple seconds to the clock. You can destroy the items in any order you like without the game telling you, so there is variety and challenge here. Boss realms are almost identical to regular platforming levels, except they have a boss near the end, and I say the word boss very loosely. They're as easy as most of the girls you went to high school with. Whenever the boss is open to being attacked, just hit them a few times and you win. They are all more or less just glorified enemies. The only one of note is Metalhead, as he actually does something other than try to smack you around. He throws enemies at you, and you have to charge into these energy poles to take him down. And you'd think with Nasty Nork being the so-called final boss, he'd be tough, but no. Just chase him throughout the level and torch him a couple times and it's over. The levels themselves are very memorable and atmospheric. Insomniac opted to make these beautiful gradient-like skyboxes in the background, which always reminded me of water paintings. Apparently, the skies were made out of a bunch of polygons which give them their iconic look. One level I really want to bring up is Twilight Harbor. It's the last level before you face Nasty Nork, and the Nork enemies use real guns, really going to show how the E rating was very different in 1998. My favorite level overall is Lofty Castle from Dreamweavers. It's something about the dreamy and fairy tale nature of this level that always resonated with me for some reason, not to mention the music sounds astoundingly pleasing. Would you believe some guy on YouTube actually made a metal version of this? Stuart Copeland, the composer of the game, also did music for movies and TV. One such movie was The Pallbearer, a romantic comedy that doesn't seem to be too popular, but the interesting fact is one of the songs that Stuart made for the film sounds an awful lot like Lofty Castle. Speaking of Stuart Copeland, my god, the music. Stuart was a drummer for a band known as The Police, and as I already mentioned, a composer for movies. Copeland was also a composer for a little-known program called The Amanda Show. You know, the days before Dan Schneider foot fetishes and Amanda Bynes going completely off the rails. He created the opening and credits theme, and the closing theme in particular sounds very similar to Wizard Peak. Is it a coincidence that the Amanda Show and Spyro 1 logos both feature purple and yellow? Stewart even composed the track for Wild Flight, the Beastmaker's flight level, right in the middle of an interview.
They pay me for this.
As for the rest of the music, it's a mixture of being very charming, upbeat, tense, and dreamlike. One of my absolute favorite soundtracks in all of gaming. Before we end off this segment, I'd like to mention the age-old mystery of the hidden music tracks in the game. There are several alternate music tracks that play at complete random if you stay in a level long enough. This is due to a glitch in the game where the music doesn't loop properly. I'll play a small bit of each alternate track. Now it's time we address the most mind-boggling version of any video game in existence. When Spyro was shown to Sony executives for the Japanese release, they thought the camera movement would somehow cause motion sickness for children. So, Insomniac had to fix this by completely making the fucking game disorienting. As you can see by this gameplay footage, you have a fixed camera perspective and Spyro's running speed is the same as his walking speed in other versions. Seriously, how in the hell could anyone beat the game, let alone 100% it? If you could somehow fully complete the game, and God bless your soul, you unlock the ability to play it normally. Just stay away from this version of the game. Spyro's completion goes up to 120%. When you get up to 100%, you unlock Nasty's Loot, a bonus level where you can find the remaining gems. This level during development was initially called Nasty Booty, which I find hilarious. You have to kill off the thieves so you can fly higher to reach the other platforms. Once that is all done, you have successfully completed Spyro the Dragon. Spyro the Dragon is an easy to pick up fun, collectathon platforming game with simple yet intriguing gameplay. Collectibles have a purpose within the story for the most part, and there is always something to keep you entertained throughout the journey. The game encourages exploration to find everything, and it's not a tedious task in the slightest. With a bombastic soundtrack, addictive yet simple levels and worlds, Spyro the Dragon makes for a perfect video game that anybody can get into. I hope everybody enjoyed this review. We still got 2 more games to cover, but until then, or whatever video comes first, I'll see ya in hell, Spyro Slayers!